Okay, so it says we're live now. Again, if you guys don't want to show your face, you can not do it and then you won't be recorded. But we're trying to like streamline things so that we can get it recorded just and whatever the easiest way possible is. And just a couple things before I kind of hand it over to Paolo and Henrique. So our conversation today is Henrique, but obviously, but again, we're kind of trying out formats, and it seems the one that's working pretty well is this kind of conversation presenter format. So we're going to keep going with that. And next week we might possibly have Thais join us. If not, we kind of have this third format that we will try, which is maybe discussing readings. And I sent out a link to everybody about the Claude Shannon text, which is tough, but has some really beautiful things in it that I think anybody can relate to. So I just wanted to lay that out at the beginning, because at the end, some people have to drop off. And today we've got Henrique, and he is going to, I think, generally talk about collage, but actually just want to say personally, when I visited Brazil in 2014, I stayed at Paulo's house. I went to Belo Horizonte, played with Henrique, and I guess many of you guys who know him know that he's a fantastic composer and improviser. And this work with collage, I think's very interesting. One, because it's got an interesting history, one that you could say goes way, way back to just general, quotation. But I think what Henrique does is takes kind of a more, kind of in this lineage of a more recent tradition, which I'm sure I'll talk about, from James Tenney and John Oswald. But I kind of have some questions, but I think Paolo is really a much better person to introduce Henrique because he knows him much better. And so I guess, we've kind of both got some statements and questions prepared, but at any time, you feel free to raise your hand or ask a question. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, I would add to that maybe we have a mailing list, and since we're doing all the administrative talk at the beginning, I would say that if you're new into this room and you want to be added to the mailing list, maybe you should just add your email address now at the chat box, so that if you have to go earlier, then we have your email address and you will receive information at your
we're using the email pretty sparingly. It's really just to kind of say what's happening in the next session, and I'm also kind of in the process of compiling links and examples that have happened from the previous sessions. So that should be pretty useful to kind of go back over what some of the things that have been played or suggested.
Yeah. So should I move on with it, Mike? Yes.
I think if nobody's got any questions, thoughts, suggestions.
Yeah. Then I'll make that kind of introduction that I guess if you're here for the third session, like if you've been here back to back in all sessions, you know that I'm supposed to do a certain kind of introduction, and with Henrique it's kind of difficult because he's one of my closest friends now. I would say that, but I'll just try and let us see what we have. So musical compositions, dancing, posters, photographing and videos, fantastic blogging and creative writing, banging pens and cans, DJing, music improvisation and weird instrument building, a dehydrated watermelon, Johann Sebastian Bach, a PhD in philosophy, Ibrazotope, QI, which is the Wednesdays of improvisation, seminal records, variations in humor, grumpy to goofy and back, not impeding the good friendships you could find with him. He is also community driven, always moving the scenes wherever he is. Technical works in audio, coffee, discipline and chaos, contradiction as a method, I hope, hardcore conceptualizations, silence and noise, lights, anime critique, and the list goes on. Tudo junto e separado, all together and separate. Is there anything that could possibly organize such a wide scope of disparate interests? A word that would turn all this into a single collection that would glue everything? The name of this collage is Henrique Iwao. Like everyone else, I suppose, a complex collage. But it sounds like this one attempts to expose this condition of being a complex collage while being in control of the situation. One huge collage which is at least semi-consciously built, I would say. At the same time, based on strict rules and discipline, but also with plenty of space to joke around. So, Henrique, hi.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I think you're actually specializing in doing it.
Yeah.
You can do this kind of stuff like for any artist now.
Yeah. If I can do it for you, I guess I can do it for any artist. Yeah. So, but tell me, do you believe? I mean, with all these like disparate interests of yours, do you believe there is something that goes on, like gluing everything, or is it just like this? Because another thing that impresses me a lot about you is that you are in general collector. Magno and I talked about it several times. Magno is the one there with the red shirt. Yeah, he's just saying hello. That you catalog everything that you do. You have everything like really organized. I mean, this could be the thing that glues everything together, like this. More of this obsession of organizing things, whatever they are. What do you think?
Well, I don't know if I'm in a position of commenting about myself on this, but I don't think I have an obsession about cataloging stuff. I just do it. But it's not like I always do it or I get very frustrated or angry about not doing it. Actually, I got a bit frustrated when doing it. But anyway, I think it's important to do it, so I do it. Maybe that means it's an obsession, but I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it's true. I tend to try to catalog everything I do. Um, so yeah, but that's not a very good answer, I think, because it's like it's one of the things I do. I actually like I would put like trying to organize what I do in the bunch of stuff that I do. So it's more like a additional item. But then you like you said in your introduction, maybe it's just my name that organizes everything, or my body.
Mhm.
but my body has a name, right? So it's actually, for example, in some of the collage I used some people like they helped me. They were estagiários. How do you, I don't know in English. As
You
people who,
hired people to help you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more my name than my body, maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, though these occasions were rare, but I used it sometimes. So actually, I hope there isn't a glue to all of this. I hope,
Mm.
because in a way there are some things that I just do once and then stop doing it. Like I really want to do something. I have an idea or a concept of what I want to do, and then I do it, and then I want to never do it again. Like I think maybe this explains a bit some stuff. But then there's things that I want to revisit from time to time. And for example, two of these things are improvisation, free improvisation using free improvisation in general. I used to play piano and then keyboards, and then I didn't like it very much. I didn't think I was a good player, a good. So I started doing this, what you call the weird instrument building.
Mm.
Um, so I went to these toys and this wooden table amplified and playing with it. But this is improvisation. This is one kind of thing that I really want to do, and I don't. I really want to do it, but I don't think it has anything to do with musical collage, for example. I just I just want to do something entirely different when I think of musical collage. I don't want. I did once a piece that has improvisation and musical collage, but anyway, it was one piece, and I don't like it very much. But um, I think it's nice to have different to find different medium or different types of music, and then develop in different ways in different types of music. Like people who play different genres, they don't necessarily have the same style for all these different kind of stuff. Uh, so the answer is I hope uh, my name is sufficient, but I am not able to see this big connection. And sometimes, like the difference between doing collage or plunderphonics and improvisation, I don't want to establish this connection. Yeah.
What's an example of something you've only done once?
Um, an example. Um, for example, actually, even with collage in the beginning, I just wanted to do this idea that is to collect all Britney Spears, all the times she sung "Baby," and then I wanted to do was to put them together, every baby she said, and then in the beginning, I think 2007 or something, I just wanted to do this once and just for her, and it was this, and it was over. Like I had an idea, and then I would do this idea, I would do the best I could, and then it was over. But actually, this in this case, it didn't happen because I started doing this with other artists, and so I made this album, digital collections. Um, but then after I finished digital collections, I actually did one more work in this sense, and then I stopped. Like, uh, like let's do other stuff. Another example is like when I worked with like circuit bending and photography, like doing this kind of bended, broken camera photography. I just took photos for like 1 or 2 years, and then I chose from 2,000, 3,000 photos, like 100 photos, and that's it. I'm not doing this again. Uh, I'm good with it, and then I can do another thing. Normally, when I have an idea and I don't see how I will integrate this with in my life, maybe I will try to do it anyway. So this is more like I do it once and then stop. Or if it's difficult to keep with it, like when I was working with the lights, analog lights, doing sounds, like you put a dimmer in a analog light, and then you put some guitar pickups or some other kind of pickup, electromagnetic, and then it goes meow, meow, and the lights go on and off. And I did this for some time with Jean-Pierre Caron, an epilepsia duo, a noise duo. I would just play lights and some synthesizer, and then after a while the lights got broken, and then I was like, no, I don't want to do with analog lights anymore. You're like, even if it's better, just try to do something else. Maybe there is lots of other examples, but from now I don't remember.
I mean, I think that's nice because it kind of, we live in the age of the specialist, which sometimes I'm really allergic to. And it's kind of nice to see someone who's got a practice that's so varied and kind of just makes the intellectual curiosity kind of shine there. But you get so many people. I mean, I think John Oswald is a good example who really sticks with something, and there's some people who do that really well. I think Phil Niblock is a great example of someone who kind
Yeah.
of focuses on one thing and does it to an incredible extent, and it's really wonderful. But they don't have that kind of varied practice. But I would also say that Phil, as focused as he is, he's not a specialist all the same.
Hmm. Yeah, I was worried about that because um, there's this thing. I think it's a Japanese thing, but maybe it's not. But once I heard from someone, I don't know if my grandfather or not, that you have to do something for 10 years, and then you start to get to know it. Like you're a beginner now. You do it for 10 years, so you can you're able to feel that you're starting to learn something from it. And I do believe in it, but at the same time I think we have these different layers. So you I can, or everyone can develop different layers. So for one layer, you can just do one thing and then go and do another thing. But you have another layer, another space of creativity that you can build this kind of more um, specialized thing also. Um, it may take more time because you're like doing crazy several stuff, but it's there. Like, for example, I've been playing improvisation for since 2003, so it's like quite a time, and also like doing this editing work on mainly musical collage since then also. So these two things at least, they're going on with them also, to have something that you can do for many years, I think. And then you see something developing, like Paulo said about dance. I like to dance contact improvisation, and I dance for since 2007. Like I dance once a month or once a week, depending on people, like other people. And then after 10 years, I was like in a jam in Sao Paulo, I think, or and I went there for this kind of event, dancing event, and then I was like, oh, now I know what I'm doing. Like after 10 years, I got this feeling that like I was starting to understand what this dance was about, and also playing this instrument I built. Also, I was 2014. I was like playing Cobra uh, by this the American composer John Zorn, and I was playing Cobra, and I had to respond very quickly to the keeper, the regente, to the how how's it in English?
Conductor.
Conductor.
To the conductor.
Conductor.
And I was very bad at it. I was like very bad, and so I was 7 years playing this instrument, and I was really bad at doing it. So 2017, I was like, oh, I'm starting to get it. Like, so the answer, I think it's there are several types of times, and you have to negotiate between them to see how many things you think it's possible, and how much you can ask of yourself to fulfill with it. Like with musical collage, I was like really into editing small things, like editing really um, tiny details of things, and I was into it because I thought that I could do it. Like um, I thought that I had learned sound mixing and editing uh, to a level that I could do it. Like it was not impossible for me to do it. I would take years to do it, but I would do it. Like and I was actually in the beginning. I was like I wondered. I hoped that some other artist would do it. Like for example, I have this Michael Jackson collage, which is all the times Michael Jackson sings something and it's not a word. So it's he does a lot of this in these studio albums. Like I think the version that is on the album MG Extended is like 30 something minutes, 36 minutes, and the editing has like 12,000 samples. So it's very, but I could do it. Like it took me 8 years, but I did it. And but there were times that I was like really wanting to give up, but then I would hear these other artists doing it on YouTube or something, and there was always this kind of small errors of editing in it, like like you take all because you see like John Oswald, plunderphonics, it's very good editing. It's like it's very good technically. It's very good. Like even when he's working with magnetic tapes on the 70s, it's like it's very good. And I wanted mine also to be very good, you know. So maybe if other artists did it with care, I wouldn't have done mine, you know. It's like in this kind of thinking, someone already did it, so I will not do it. But then it's not like that because I wanted to give a certain rhythm that maybe other person would not do it. Um, I could, I think I could play the sampler now because if someone didn't heard the album digital collections, coleções digitais, this is a good time to get to know what I'm talking about. So it's a bit of each track. It will take, I think, 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yeah, play
Okay,
it.
so I'll do it.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Renata, Maria, Maria. Aurora, Aurora, Aurora. Amora, Amora, Teodora. Nina, Nina.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. I I I have a I could go on with a question about since you mentioned the maybe your technical background or your technical inclination and the kind of expectations that you have about how everything will result. I wonder if you could. I had some notes here, like I'm always curious about your technical idioms, how you do it, how and where to cut the samples, how and where to crossfade. I once had this conversation with Sarpa, a common friend of ours, and he named you the crossfade virtuoso. So this got stick to my mind, and I'm really curious about what you have to say about it. How to superimpose, for instance. I know that you developed a very curious technique for superimposing the different tracks. In, for instance, your work with the Beatles albums. I once asked you if you have any preferences of time stretch settings, stuff like that for the Daphne Jardin work. You also mention every once in a while the idea of corrections, and we know that you hire assistants to help you. So what kind of corrections do you do? And maybe what's more interesting to me is that, and this is something that you can gather, for instance, reading Marcelo Carneiro's text about the work of 4 Brazilian South artists, including you, which is the idea that you have your prime interest in the digital collections is formal, right? So you set for yourself, I can imagine that, a set of rules, and then you abide to them. But every once in a while, and this is something that you can also read in your liner notes, there are from your texts, quotations like very musicological indeed. You're talking about your process, yeah. But musicality was needed to make it look as a good selection, like collectors do. So I recall Mike also talking about his and other artists' use of what he calls mathematical objects. But in the work of Egidia, for example, Egidia Medexite, I can't remember her name. He praised, for instance, the fact that she, yes, uses the musical objects in order to build music, actually. So I wonder what kind of compromise, what is musicality in your conceptions, and how does it relate with the technical idioms that you collected, that you gathered with this 10 years span of work, editing stuff?
Yeah. So I'll try to answer to divide this comment into some about about this stuff that I played to every one of you. How it's done and how do I do with crossfading and stuff. The answer is I try to do simple editing to the maximum. So I try to avoid at maximum doing crossfade or doing equalization or doing volume adjustment. I don't use any effects like any effects at all. But even crossfading and volume corrections, I try to use them only when I tried all like 3 or 4 other solutions and then it was not working. So the thing is to try to really focus on simple editing, like cutting and cutting in the right position, and try to work the maximum of it. So I think this answers a lot, because I think like if you really do several hours of cutting, just cutting and trying to solve in the simplest way, you start to get better with crossfading and correcting the volume. Maybe I'm wrong, but and
So usually you don't do you tend to not. I didn't know that you tend not to do a crossfade. So if you are superimposing, all the like babies, and you have superimposing all the babies. That's a new sentence. Like you're superimposing all the babies, and if you tend not to do crossfades, then you just pick a point where the wave of the sample you're in is exactly on the same amplitude level of the sample you're going to put next. So you don't get clicks. Like you try to find zero crossings, everything as close to zero as possible.
No, I'm doing fade in, fade out, but
for every sample, every pair of samples.
Sample, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's not so crazy, but it's just that if I can work it out without crossfade, I will do it without it.
Okay.
So in the case of Britney Spears, it's easier because of the beats and harmonical content. But like in the case of Varese, that this collage using Varese idée fixe, like this pom 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 pom, and then I had to use lots of crossfade and some volume arrangements, but still then I will try not to do it, and then I go to do it. Something that I do a lot, that I did a lot for this kind of stuff also, is to edit and then close my eyes, like the next day, close my eyes and then do it and hear it. And then if I notice where I cut, I stop with the bar, the space bar. And then I should, in my mind, if I get it wrong, then I did a good job, you know. Like if I can recognize the point that I edited, then it was good.
Is there something that attracts you about the tedium of it? I mean, it's such an incredible amount of work. Are you generally someone who enjoys really kind of zoning out and doing these things that take an incredible amount of time?
I'm not. I got very. I don't enjoy it very much. That's why I didn't, like, after this one I did just one more and then I stopped. Like okay, I did it like long. It took me like the Michael Jackson track, which has very intricate editing. It took me like 520 hours to do it, maybe. But I didn't think it was very soothing. I was just committed to the idea that I was going to finish it. And if I was going to finish it, then and I was already like 100 hours of working in it, then like, what the hell? Just like, and this track was kind of difficult technically, to answer Paulo a bit more, because there are some sounds in Michael Jackson's editing that the adjustments were in the microseconds temporal scale. So I would not recognize my corrections if I heard just like a second of music. So I had to do like 20 corrections and then hear everything, and then I had to guess what maybe was wrong and then try again. It was very tiring because I wanted to get this feel of a drummer being live in some editing. But how do you do it? Like, because I'm not able to hear myself the changes when I edit in the millisecond temporal scale, you know, without beats above or without mathematical or scores kind of stuff to guide yourself. So it's kind of intuitive and it's kind of try and error, but at the same time it's like a blind spot you have in your editing. I don't know, this is a problem actually. I think it's an interesting problem because you want to correct it and to give it the right accent to something that is very small, very, very short. But if you just correct it, you will not notice the difference in that small period of, in this sample position. You have to hear the entire phrase. And then you hear the entire phrase, you don't know where it gone wrong if it's like 20 samples. It's
Well, another case of that reminds me of another remark of yours. Because what you're saying now is that you should hear the whole phrase just to check if the correct accents, if your editing is good enough. But when you are editing stuff like language, when there is someone speaking something and you want to retain the meaning of it, I guess you are in a time scale in which, like, I have the impression every once in a while that any 5 milliseconds could make a slight difference in the quality, for instance, of a consonant, you know. And and if I'm not mistaken, you had similar problems editing the Caboclo Faroeste. Is it right? Or
Yeah, it's right. Uh, because I had this other project which was reordering in alphabetical order several songs. Like there's a famous Brazilian song, Faroeste Caboclo, which has a 9-minute lyrics. So this was the first choice, and I did it. Like I took 40 hours, and I did it. And the problem was similar because you added like 5 milliseconds more, where you cannot notice the difference in that point. Like it's not. It's funny because it makes a difference. It makes a difference in the phrase, but you cannot tell it by editing 5 milliseconds more. So it's interesting, but it's kind of, it gets on your nerves when you're working. About corrections, it's like corrections is like this. You hear it again, and then maybe you think some phrase is not really uh, going smoothly. Like, do you know this composer Noah Krashevsky? I don't know if anyone know him. He's very nice composer. He was close to John Zorn, I think, also doing plunderphonics. And he has these collages where he takes mainly classical music phrases. And it's interesting because he does this very continuous and flowing music, like with lots of scales, like and but he makes it with collages and sampling. So you get this interesting mix, which I think it reminds of when you uh, cut letters from magazines, and then you do the phrase with lots of different typography types of letters. And then you have continuity in the meaning, and then you have discontinuity in the types in the. So I wanted to have flow, like a musical flow, asking about what is musicality. So I wanted to have flow, something flowing most of the time, because I was cutting like to one thing against the other. Like the normal, when you cut and you do something that would normally be fragmented, and then because of that, I want to do something that was going to flow more than be really fragmented. But then I think the musicality is something that once you have like a formal design for something, you have to discover, you have to like extract it, and you have to like I think maybe Michael agrees with this or not. Like, if I have a design, like for example, I do a collage with all babies by Britney Spears, and then it's fragmented, the babies, then I want to make it flow, because she works with very strong beats. And then I also want to make more interesting than the original, the rhythms. And then when I'm doing this, I discover this musicality I want. Like the rules, it seems that the rules go first, like, because there are times I start doing something, I have several abandoned stuff that I have the idea or the rules, but somehow it doesn't work. Like I could do it, but what's the point if I cannot discover this thing inside it?
Um, since you directed a comment to me, I just want to say, and actually I use this to ask a couple questions, but I think that's what's so interesting about this work is that there's this kind of formalized process. And I kind of find, I mean, for me personally, a lot of this music that is process based or however or algorithmic or has kind of some underlying design. I actually think that that can be very liberating. At least I can say in the work, a lot of the work that I appreciate, and in my own work, I kind of got to be a musician after I laid out the rules. So I think when I was now I'm old and stupid, but when I was younger and stupid, I kind of had this idea that I could kind of avoid my musicality and my biases, and therefore, then I'd create something new. But actually, that was a really misguided thought. What's kind of much more interesting is kind of becoming, doing composerly things, which you kind of become allowed to do in a much more fluid way, in my opinion, once you have a set of rules. I think that's what I like, especially about the piece where you reordered the words, is that you have this wonderful structure. It kind of guides it, but then you're still kind of using your ears, which I think is really nice. And what I wanted to ask, which I think defines things that I like about certain types of collage music is over others, and this is again, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but it seems like your aesthetic kind of lies within this realm of possibilities that I find more interesting, because I think it kind of distinguishes itself from a more postmodernist technique, which is kind of a reappropriation of the object and kind of a professionalization of it. Whereas you just kind of have this guiding principle or this guiding process that you're interested in exploring. It kind of shows a curiosity more than this kind of imperialist tendency to master something, so to speak. Other people who I think do that well, are people like, I think Jim Tenney's, piece Blue Suede is a really, good early example that's kind of quite reverent, does this. I think John Oswald is another one. And then there's a lot of really bad examples where people are kind of, borrowing in a way that they're not just putting their name on it, they're kind of putting a veneer of professionalism in it. So just to get to my question, I'm kind of curious, you had this Britney Spears idea, which was the first one. I'm kind of curious what other people you would recommend, and even not in, I know that there's, experimental poetry genres that share a lot of similarity, like poems that use only words that start with a certain letters. And then also kind of how you feel about this divide, if you have any thoughts about it, between, kind of using a found object, being reverent to the object or the music before it, as opposed to kind of imperialist reappropriation of it.
Well, I'm big fan of Christian Markley. I think it's a very known name, though. He has some. It's very interesting, and sometimes it's just collecting. I think he does, but it's more like collecting a lot of stuff, and it doesn't connect. It always connects with this idea we were talking about finding some musicality or finding. Um, but he has lots of works. I think it's difficult to say about this kind of professionalism you're talking about, because I think like I really like his stuff, but he's like a huge artist. Like I think he do you know uh, w- where do I trace the line? Because he has stuff like 1,000 Christmas records, and which looks like very much just for the money, or just for the fun, or just for the I have enough assistants and money to do whatever I want and get a gallery. So I don't know.
Maybe that's not necessarily what I was. Yeah, maybe I confuse things with the word professionalism. I mean, I like or at least some of the Christian Markway work that I've seen. You know, like the clock has a very clear, wonderful process that's behind it. But
Maybe
I
you're
kind of,
talking about taking it as something outside of your interests, like just using as another technique, like using.
yeah, and a technique that you master over the amateur that's created it in the first place,
Okay, right.
which I think you see a lot of in kind of new music, you know, with a big N and a big M.
Mm.
You know, where people are kind of, you know, the composer with the big C, and that's giving them the liberty to kind of take and reappropriate. And it's kind of not about curiosity. It's about being like, oh, I see all this stuff as kind of someone above, and I'm the one that can put it together, you know, to show my mastery over it all. And I think you
Yeah.
see that a lot in new music, kind of more instrumental music, more than the world's, you know, of kind of sound collage that you're doing, or David Mahler, or and less, and as opposed to, yeah, Christian Markway or some of these trends in experimental poetry.
Mm. Well, I think have you read that book in Portuguese? Is Teoria da Vanguarda, Vanguard Theory, maybe, by Peter Berger. Peter
I've
Berger.
I've not read it now.
Yeah. It's a kind of Adornian, Frankfurtian school essay in the 80s, 80s or maybe 70s to 80s, about how the Dadaist performance, or the Dadaist act was incorporated, it was appropriated by the institutions of art. So it got very diluted, very, you know, uh, you could do it without the critic implied in the initial gesture. And probably everything is like this, you know. So maybe I don't think it's. I think everything you could do, you could, like, the institution could arrange to be like this, and then people who are doing art for um, more professionally, in the bad sense, like more just for his job, will probably do it that way. But something that I find very interesting about this kind of found objet trouvé stuff, is that actually anyone can do it. Like, okay, not anyone can do it in the sense of putting in a gallery, you know. Actually, uh, just a few persons can do it in that way. But in the sense that everyone really could do it in the non-institutional sense, I think it's very nice. So, for example, uh, this kind of taking all yellings of Michael Jackson, or all times that people in Harry Potter movies said Harry, I did it, but I know other people who done it, like the same idea, exactly the same. You know, I think mine are better because it took more time to do it. Like, I added really, like, I was really, I done a detailed work on it. Um, but it's nice that other people are doing like this kind of YouTube stuff, like 800% slower. Like a person goes at his house and then at her house and take a software and then take a music she likes and then uh, put it 800% slower and put it on YouTube. That's very nice.
Yeah. I think you just articulated what I was trying to say in a much better, shorter way, which is exactly that. You don't need to be the master to be able to do it, and that kind of puts things on a much more horizontal level. And I think that's why I'm personally very attracted to these things, is that I can kind of feel that lack of a hierarchy there, and just the ambition to do it, and I find that really attractive. And so I think that's kind of what I would have said if I were a bit more succinct, is that kind of leveling of the playing field. And the music I was referring to takes this sort of, it's the professionalism I'm talking about is the mastery, is the specialization that, I'm good enough that I can do it, as opposed to just having an idea that's interesting enough that anybody can do it.
Yeah, and I like it because as Paulo was talking earlier, kind of said for an interview and maybe in some texts I wrote that I was interested in the formal aspect, and I think there is in a way like this kind of 800% slower, like the all at once videos at YouTube where you take an artist and put all his or her music uh, one on top of the other, and then it sounds like noise. And it's kind of a genre, but it's actually it's like I was thinking that it was like a fugue, or prelude and fugue, or some very defined formal um, type of music. And I was always interested in this because I don't know why actually. I was always very interested, like, because and also when you hear lots of stuff, like for example Los Hermanos, all music by Los Hermanos, one on top of another all at once, or all Metallica songs all at once, or like 50 Merzbow albums on top of one another. It got silence because it phases out everything. I'm kidding. But then if you're if you have this artist stuff in you, and you really want to contribute something like to the world, then it makes you think, okay, I want to do this, but how can I do it that is just that's at the same time it supports people who are doing it, like at the same time mm, it's not uh, you love that people do it, like you check in YouTube the videos, etc., but at the same time you say, no, I want to do something that this is the beginning of the process, like I have to really think about it, and to add something. Maybe this something is musicality. Yeah.
Or at least your personal musicality.
Yeah. Of course, yeah, it's better. But anyway, musicality in the sense that many people also do this kind of thing without a sense of personality. So I just
Or they don't think it's music. They just think it's just like some you know fun kitschy thing to do.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or also another term for that is like popular YouTube conceptual art.
I
Because,
think another example of this is what AMSR.
yeah.
And
so it's interesting because I had this question marked here for me: the why sampling? And for what I could get of your answer now, of actually of from snippets of your conversation, is that maybe being included in a community of because you are going into generic stuff and the genre, maybe being inserted in a community is kind of what makes you go through sampling and these YouTube genres, for example.
Mm. Well, I think everything every community helps. Like every time you have a community, you have some kind of fulfillment, maybe. Yeah. Uh, but I wouldn't. But that's just a part of it. Yeah. I think there are many answers. Like one answer is this kind of that I found in sampling some way to make rules that I could make music using very defined rules, like to reorder alphabetically a song. That's a very binding rule. So this is one point. For example, I loved to do counterpoint exercise when I was a student. So maybe that relates to it. The other thing is, I was thinking of talking about it because of the name of the seminar, like spending the field, like thinking about field recording, like uh, in the other occasion, is that um, people hear pop music a lot in whether they like it or not, whether they want to hear it or not. This is an argument that John Oswald made several times. Like this famous artist like Christian Marclay uh, said it also, is like it's unavoidable. So if it's unavoidable, it's part of the ambient of the sound field. So if it's part of the sound field, maybe if you're an artist, you want to work with it, or you want to exorcise your phantoms because you don't like it, so you start working with the stuff you don't like it. uh, so that's another answer, because um, I think it doesn't make much sense to me, like if you're living in a very calm countryside, to really get into musical collage, uh, at least for me, it's like it's more like, why do I have to hear the people putting music all the time? Why do I have to put music all the time? Why do I put music all the time? And then um, this from this uh, the impulse to make collage happens. And of course, of hearing very good collage also, like James Taney. I was really into it when I heard it was like classical electroacoustic music, but very, very strange. Like, uh, anyway.
I have a question just about how this relates. Paulo and you have both talked about community, and I actually see Dorothy there, who I haven't seen in many years. And when I first came there, that was one thing that was very exciting to me, was to participate in events. And I know that you guys used to run a space in Belo Horizonte, but this is really quite a contrast. This thing that you spend, 8 years doing, I imagine, mostly alone. But I was just curious, how those different types of interaction or lack of interaction are part of your practice. And also, I'd be interested just to hear, how you feel about community. I know that you've been really, really important and integral into the various music scenes in both Belo Horizonte and São Paulo. And I just like to hear about it.
The first question is, how did I was stupid enough to, for example, not go on vacation on Spain and work 8 hours for 2 months in a studio by the school I worked doing editing. I don't know. It seems totally unreasonable now. Um, I think for many people, for like very talented people, I when I meet a person that I think has a project that is very, I think it's very potent. There is this kind of step, like a stupidity step. Like if the person does not cross it, she just stays there. It's not gonna happen. Like the I don't know. Maybe it's something like this. And I think many people have very interesting works that or ideas that are very demanding, and I met some of them in my life, and most of them would not do this step. Like they would think like, no, I I don't have time for this, or I don't I want to do more interesting stuff. But somehow I am this kind of maybe goal oriented. So
Yeah, I mean, you could say that the difference between, I mean, many people have distinctions as to who is an artist and who is not, but one's for certain, either you finish it or you don't. You can't just say you've got the idea. You either kind of, take that step or you're just someone with an idea, but to actually implement it, that's often not so easy.
yeah, and it's like I think about this a lot, about writing a book. I don't know how people write a book. It's it seems very frightening, but I could do it if I start.
Yeah, but you probably wouldn't call yourself an author before you finished it.
Yeah. Um, then you asked about music scenes. Can you elaborate a bit more? You want to, or someone?
Well, I mean, I just think that those are really disparate things. One is kind of not going to see your friends in order to achieve this idea that you have, but then you kind of have found the time to do both, and a lot of that has been, being very active in these various musical communities.
Well, I must say that I always find it really impressive that Henrique could manage such huge projects as these that we are talking about, like the digital collections, and still be able to be a part of, I don't know, maybe every musical scene I've been into, he was a central figure to it. I think this is actually very impressive. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if you
I
sleep.
don't go to parties, for example. No, like, yeah, I don't know how to answer this. I it's I tend to get I tend to get involved in much more thing stuff that I should. And if I can make a better answer. Uh, like this Michael Jackson stuff, I really remember going to vacations a lot. Like not like there were like 2 or 3 years that I didn't do a day of vacation. But it's like, yeah. Can you hear me? Everyone?
Yeah, yeah.
We're wondering where you find the time.
Yeah. But I feel that nowadays I don't have time. Like that's why I'm just I don't know. I've done some work on improvisation a lot, and when I'm not in this perfectionist mood, I just do what I know and don't worry about, like when I edit videos or do mix or master work, I just do what I want. I don't take myself so hard on, like I so I don't ask much of myself. Just maybe that buys me some time. And
When you're improvising, do you also sometimes take a formalist approach? Like say like, okay, I'm going to play and this is kind of the domain of things I can do. Like here are my rules before I play, or is that really something completely separate?
no, it's like free improvisation. The thing with free improvisation that I like is to try to have a grip and some level of control of the musical structure of the improvisation. Like, okay, there's no a priori musical structure, but there are some events that trigger some kind of response or some kind of texture changing or some kind of mood. And I want to be very aware of these moments. And I want to have some strategies to cause these moments. So, for example, it's too fast paced, agitated improvisation. I want to be able to think how to make it turn into a slow improvisation. Of course, when people know that you're doing this kind of stuff on purpose, they will counteract many times this kind of trying to take over the musical structure. But anyway, this is something that goes to my mind. But the other thing is trying to play well, because I play just a bunch of toys and objects, and I do not um, rehearse. I rehearse. It's rare, so it's more like I play when we have a gig. Or so I'm very worried also of how to do it properly as a musician because I did not rehearse a lot at home.
Is there anything else you want to play? Do you have any more examples? Because you had your stuff set up there.
Mm. Okay, I'll play just a tiny part of Caboclo Faroeste, that is this alphabetical reordered song. When I was doing this song, I decided to break it into three parts because of the original song had 3 parts. So it sounded better, I think. So I'm going to play just a bit, like 2 minutes, maybe. Is it good?
Great. Yeah.
Okay, then. The beginning, I try to follow the bass line, like the notes of the bass line in alphabetical order.
Acabou com achar aí. Ainda ajudar, linha alimentar, voltar. Amigos para nós que aprendeu. Já aprendi isso aqui, essas coisas a matéria aumentou orgulho bandido, passado mistificado, bisavô, boiadeiro, Bolívia, boizinho, Brasília, cafezinho, cansado, carteiro, causa caixinha do centro central. Cercania chegando, cidade, as coisas colocavam com começou, comia, tomamos, comprou, conhecia, conversa, criança, crucificada, da sandália, dançou, dava, decidiu, deixou Deus diante diferentes, dinheiro, vida, discriminação, diziam elaborou, ele encontrou, entendia, era a escola, escolheu, estou estudando, deveu falar. Fazendo as vezes ficou filha. Foi, perguntava, funcionava, ganhava, gastava gente horas, ia, crescendo no inferno, influência interessante, Itaguatinga. Já Jesus, João, foi lá, libertar, ainda, lugar, luz, madeira, mandado marasmo, mais médico, melhor, menininhas, 3 meses mesmo, meu Deus, minha ministra morava e morreu, morte, muita luta, não, Natal, negócio, esse método, no nome norte, noticiário, comunidade novo, pode, onde ônibus, eu via, vai, país, hora, passagem, pegar pela pensar, perdeu. Peruano, Planalto, anos, plantação, poder, culpado pra precisando, primeiro, professor, propósitos, quando...
Does it make sense to you, Michael? All this strange.
I can hear the beginning of each word. No, it does. No, I can follow some of the words. I think it's a great piece. I really like it. How's it? One piece I like of yours a lot too, from what the listening, and I told you that in email, is that clock piece, but that's not necessarily collage.
Yeah. It's not necessarily collage, but I tried to do this kind of 800% slower that we were talking about, and I was trying to do it with stuff, and then I arrived at the well-tempered clavier of Bach.
Maybe just explain the piece, because I brought this piece up, but maybe others don't know about it.
Yeah. So it's not by me, this piece. It's by Daphne Jardim. She is like my phantom sister, phantom Gemini sisters. I don't know. So when I was born, this possibility of her being born was ruled out of existence, and then she started as a phantom. And then she came back, and then she made this piece, and actually I was trying to do something like 800% slower, or I don't know how many times slower. And I actually I I'm very passionate about the well-tempered keyboard clavier by Bach. I have these urtext scores, like the very official scores that you buy and then you play at your home in your piano. I don't have a piano for years, but like for 7 years, but I used to have one. And I used to play this kind of piece a lot, Prelude and Fugue by Bach. And I love the Glenn Gould recording also. Like really heard it like hundreds of times. So I arrived at trying to do with this kind of stuff, and then I discovered that I could make every prelude and fugue to have a duration of 1 hour. It would fit on this like it was like varied from like 4 times time stretch to 14 times, but mostly like 6 times, 8 times, five to 8 times duration, I think. Maybe
In that sense, it could
more,
be considered collage.
yeah, 10 times. So I got and did a post stretch of this, and then I organized it as a clock because they were like 24. Like she organized it as a clock, um, and then I started to think about it, like what did it meant, and I was reading a lot of Mark Fisher's stuff at the time. This this philosopher, he died recently, but he wrote about these musical works and like movies that were haunted, and he talked about the hauntological aspect of this in relation to like uh, capitalism like destroying our sense of future, and how some music, by getting caught in this phantom land and this haunted atmosphere, was like connecting with this idea of no future in like recent capitalism. And then I started, and then suddenly it all got together, and then it was about how I like to play piano, and um how I don't play anymore, and how this got haunted. So Paulo asked about the how did I work with time stretch, and how did I choose settings for the time stretch. But it was actually much more intuitive, because I wanted to make it sound haunted, and I had the references, like things that Mark Fisher wrote about, like artists like Philip Jack, um, Ghost Box Label, the Caretaker. I actually don't like Caretaker at all, but anyway, because I don't like his sound. It's very peculiar, because I really like his ideas, but when I don't like to hear his music because of the sound. Anyway, um, so I had an idea of what was haunted, like in this vocabulary. And I started to think that the Brazilian relation to this German tradition was kind of haunted, like German tradition of great composers like uh, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, you know, up to Stockhausen maybe. And then the piece got worked it out as a clock, because as a clock it could haunt the house or the time itself or the day itself. It could like repeat endlessly day to day. So you got these other ideas into it, and no one like stops to hear something for a day. So the kind of hearing that you get, I think, after 3 hours and a half, 3 hours of music, it's more like ambient, you know. 3 hours, I think it's a very interesting duration. Like we have in Brazil this kind of Telmo Cristóvão, this artist, very sound artist, that really I think he really likes 3 hour durations. It's very interesting time block of time. But anyway, like 24 hours is not. It's more like your ambient. So if it's your ambient, it will haunt more. That was my thinking.
I think it's interesting if you compare, for instance, Daphne Jardin's work with yours. That you get, for instance, like this huge mark of pop Brazilian 80s and 90s culture, which is the Faroeste Caboclo song, and you overstructure it, right? And then what you do with Bach is you remove all structure of it by slowing it. Then the counterpoint is lost. You don't exactly hear the relationships of it. And then this removing of structure is maybe what makes you able to transform it into like, you use the term background music, but I would use ambient. I agree with you with when you say that after 3 hours, what you get is ambient, but in your text, you use background music. The text that you published in the proceedings of Sonologia Encounter. I think this is an interesting inversion, getting something that is pop and in the ambient of our generation and overstructuring it, and then getting Bach and removing the structure of it so that you could put this into the ambient. But what interests me most is that what you just said, first you did the piece, not you, but Daphne Jardin produced the piece. And then you started thinking about what it meant. So maybe this conceptual part came later. This is a surprise to me.
Maybe I explained a bit in a rush, but it was not that I did the piece first, but I was trying to do something like in the manner of 800% slower. So I was experimenting with doing this kind of just take a music and make it 8 times slower. And then after doing with some music, and then then I found Bach, and then when I found Bach, I was reading Mark Fisher, and then it got into this haunted kind of atmosphere. Then, for example, I did a octave, octavator, octave, I don't know, something that makes a octave down.
A pitch shifter.
Yeah. I think it's a doubler actually, like an octave down. But and then I tried to do several stuff to make it sound better in a kind of a haunted way. And actually, there's this Lucas Rodriguez from Tudos that he heard it several times, sometimes, and he helped me uh, to make me aware of the difficulty of putting bass on something that was post-ratchet. I don't think it sounds really good, like, but at least I was able to get some bass in it. Maybe if I do it again, I'll have to learn or to search for something that makes the bass more present, more, you know. Uh, but it was a process, like, so it's not like that I really did everything musical first and then asked for the conceptual part. But I was trying something from the rules, and then it got entangled in kind of random life of myself, like what I was reading, what I remember my childhood was, what, you know.
Great. About the video, is it going to be released?
Oh yeah. Sorry. Well, yeah, I was talking with the Chico Dubby, but for doing it in next Novas Frequências festival. But then because of Corona and this stuff, I don't know. So there is this possibility of doing the 1 hour version at the festival. Like, so if I do at the festival, I should not do it before it, you know. And the 30-minute version, I'm really sorry. Moshiwaki arimasen. Yeah, I should have done it, but you know, maybe I'm not able anymore to do several layers of stuff at the same time.
Just explain a bit of the video, just for
Okay.
people.
Well, the piece is on the Bandcamp, right? So if some people who are seeing the video now didn't hear it, you should start the piece at midnight, and it lasts a day. It's called German Lounge Volume 1 by Daphne Jardim. We can also put I think the link is already there on the Facebook. But anyway, I was together with Paulo and also with Ian Schuler at Rio de Janeiro, and let me see here. It's more than it's already a year, right?
I think so. Yeah, maybe more.
Yeah. And we played at this place, Fosso, de Janeiro. Paulo is organizer of this place, and we made a recording there in which like it was like, for example, it was 5 hours, 5 o'clock, and then we put the 5 o'clock track, and then Paulo did a recording of the ambient recording, but then it was in another place in the same house, in another room. It was getting sounds from the community around the neighborhood. Lots of birds, cars passing sometimes, and some people doing music together. So the idea of haunting this place was more clear, and the music was working as an ambient also. So the idea was preserved, and then it was also filmed by Young, and so that we could get all this together. Okay, is it clear? I don't know. And because Fosso is like in the top of how would I say, favela? I don't know. In Rio de Janeiro.
Community. I don't know
Yeah.
the correct word for it.
Yeah. And you can see the whole Rio de Janeiro, like a very good part of Rio de Janeiro from there. It's very beautiful. So I also had this idea that maybe this bar that sounded more like Bruckner or something, like, or a cheesy movie soundtrack, orchestral. I think this kind of traditional stuff was also some kind of haunting presence of tradition in Brazilian music also. So anyway, this all got together.
So I think
We
maybe
lost Henrique himself.
yeah.
Should
I
we
guess
say
this is
that's a good time to stop?
I guess this is his way to say that it's time to wrap it up.
Sorry, I think to close something and close the younger.
But I guess this is a good time to wrap things up, right?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Enrique. I'm going to stop the stream now. So thank you, Enrique.
You're welcome.